Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the hallways of the National Science Institute with her head held high. Even though she could feel every pair of eyes following her movement, the whispers had started 3 weeks ago, but now they felt like a constant buzz in her ears. Her colleagues, people she had worked alongside for 15 years, now looked at her with suspicion and doubt. The controversy began when Dr. Marcus Webb, a senior researcher from Harvard, published an article questioning the legitimacy of Sarah's recent awards. In the past 2 years, she had received the Presidential Medal of Science, the International Physics Prize, and the Defense Innovation Award. These were some of the highest honors a scientist could achieve, and Sarah had earned them for her groundbreaking work in quantum computing and cryptography. But Marcus Webb claimed it was impossible for someone her age to have made such significant discoveries. At 38, Sarah was indeed young to have received such prestigious recognition. Webb argued in his article that her research must have been stolen from other scientists, or that the awards were given to her for political reasons rather than scientific merit. The article spread like wildfire through the scientific community. Social media exploded with debates about whether Sarah deserved her accolades. News reporters began calling her office daily, asking for comments about the allegations. The institute's director, Dr. Robert Harrison, had even suggested that Sarah take a temporary leave of absence until the matter could be investigated. Sarah refused to step down. She knew her work was legitimate, and she had the documentation to prove it. Every experiment, every breakthrough, every late night spent in the lab was recorded in her detailed research journals. But proving authenticity in the court of public opinion was far more difficult than proving it in a laboratory. The truth was that Sarah had always been exceptional. Born to immigrant parents who ran a small restaurant in San Francisco's Chinatown, she had shown an extraordinary aptitude for mathematics and science from an early age. While other children played video games, Sarah spent her afternoons reading advanced physics textbooks that her high school teacher had given her. Her parents, Chen Wei and Linda Chen, worked 16-hour days to support their family. They spoke limited English but understood the importance of education. Every dollar they could spare went towards Sarah's academic pursuits. They bought her books, paid for tutoring, and supported her decision to skip 2 grades in high school. Sarah graduated from high school at 16 and received a full scholarship to Stanford University. She completed her bachelor's degree in physics in 3 years, then earned her PhD in quantum mechanics by the age of 23. Her doctoral thesis on quantum entanglement caught the attention of several government agencies, and she was recruited by the National Science Institute immediately after graduation. For 15 years, Sarah had worked tirelessly in her laboratory, often sleeping on a cot in her office when experiments required constant monitoring. Her research focused on developing quantum computers that could break traditional encryption methods while simultaneously creating new, unbreakable codes. This work had significant implications for national security, and much of it was classified. The Presidential Medal of Science had been awarded to her for developing a quantum algorithm that could process information millions of times faster than conventional computers. The International Physics Prize recognized her discovery of a new quantum state that had previously been thought impossible. The Defense Innovation Award was given for her work on quantum cryptography systems that would protect military communications. Each award was thoroughly vetted by panels of expert scientists and government officials. Sarah's work had been independently verified by multiple research teams. The results of her experiments had been replicated in laboratories around the world. There was no question about the validity of her scientific contributions, but Marcus Webb's article focused on circumstantial evidence that seemed suspicious to those who didn't understand the rigorous process behind scientific awards. He pointed out that Sarah was young, that she came from a non-academic background, and that much of her work was classified, making it difficult for outsiders to verify. He suggested that political correctness and diversity initiatives had influenced the award committees. The allegations hurt Sarah deeply, not just professionally but personally. She thought about her parents, who had sacrificed so much for her education. She thought about the nights she had spent alone in the lab, working through problems that seemed impossible to solve. She thought about the moment she first observed quantum entanglement in her experiments, a discovery that had brought tears to her eyes. Webb's accusations weren't just questioning her work, they were questioning her character and integrity. They suggested that she was a fraud who had stolen credit for other people's discoveries. For someone who had dedicated her life to the pursuit of truth through science, these allegations were devastating. The media attention intensified when several prominent scientists publicly supported Webb's position. Dr. Patricia Morgan, a Nobel Prize winner, stated in an interview that the scientific community needed to be more careful about verifying achievements before awarding honors. Dr. James Peterson, a department head at MIT, suggested that political pressure might have influenced recent award decisions. These statements gave Webb's allegations credibility in the eyes of the public. Suddenly, Sarah found herself defending not just her work, but her right to be recognized for it. The Institute's board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Some members suggested conducting an internal investigation, while others wanted to publicly defend Sarah's achievements. Dr. Harrison, the Institute's director, was caught in the middle. He had known Sarah for years and had always been impressed by her dedication and brilliance. But he also understood the political pressure the Institute was facing. Major donors were asking questions, and government funding could be at risk if the controversy continued to grow. Sarah's research team stood by her unwaveringly. Dr. James Kim, her longtime laboratory partner, spoke to reporters about Sarah's work ethic and attention to detail. Maria Rodriguez, a graduate student who had worked with Sarah for 3 years, described the countless hours Sarah spent mentoring young scientists and reviewing their research. But support from her immediate colleagues wasn't enough to counter the growing narrative that Sarah's awards were undeserved. The controversy had taken on a life of its own, spreading beyond the scientific community and into mainstream media. Talk show hosts debated whether diversity initiatives had gone too far. Opinion columnists wrote about the importance of merit in academic recognition. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but the constant scrutiny made it nearly impossible. Security guards had been assigned to escort her to and from her laboratory after she received several threatening messages. Her research suffered as she spent more time responding to media inquiries and meeting with lawyers than conducting experiments. The situation reached a breaking point when the Institute's board of directors scheduled a formal hearing to review Sarah's awards. The hearing would be open to the public and would include testimony from both supporters and critics. Sarah would have the opportunity to defend her work, but she would also be subjected to intense questioning about every aspect of her research and career. As the date of the hearing approached, Sarah felt the weight of 15 years of work resting on her shoulders. She had overcome poverty, discrimination, and countless scientific challenges to reach the pinnacle of her field. Now she had to prove that she belonged there. The night before the hearing, Sarah sat in her laboratory, surrounded by the equipment that had been her constant companion for so many years. The quantum computer she had built hummed quietly in the corner, its complex calculations processing even as she reflected on her journey. She thought about the phone call she had received from her parents earlier that evening. Her father, now in his 70s, had spoken to her in his broken English, telling her that he was proud of her, no matter what anyone said. Her mother had cried on the phone, worried that the stress was affecting Sarah's health. Sarah looked at the framed copy of her first published research paper, hanging on the wall beside her numerous awards and certificates. She remembered the excitement she had felt when the journal accepted her work, the validation that her ideas were worthy of scientific scrutiny. Tomorrow, she would walk into that hearing room and face her accusers. She would present her evidence, answer their questions, and defend her life's work. She had truth on her side, but she also knew that truth didn't always prevail in the court of public opinion. As she prepared to leave the laboratory, Sarah's assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Chen," he said, looking excited. "I just received a call from Dr. Harrison's office. There's been a development regarding tomorrow's hearing, something about a special guest who wants to attend." Sarah looked up from her desk, curious about who might be interested in her case. "Did they say who?" Her assistant shook his head. "No." But Dr. Harrison seemed very surprised by the request. He said it was someone important, someone whose presence might change everything. Sarah gathered her papers and locked her laboratory for the night. As she walked through the empty hallways of the Institute, she wondered what surprise awaited her tomorrow. She had prepared for months to defend her work against scientific criticism, but she had no idea that the next day would bring a revelation that would silence her critics forever. The hearing was scheduled to begin at 9 in the morning, and Sarah knew that by noon, either her reputation would be restored or her career would be effectively over. She had no way of knowing that a single phone call to the White House had already set in motion events that would vindicate her completely. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Sarah steeled herself for the battle ahead. Tomorrow, she would face her critics with dignity and truth, and perhaps, with a little help from an unexpected ally, she would emerge victorious. The morning of the hearing arrived with gray clouds covering the sky, matching Sarah's somber mood, as she prepared for what could be the most important day of her career. She had barely slept, spending most of the night reviewing her research notes and preparing responses to every possible question her critics might ask. Dr. Harrison had called her at 7 in the morning with more details about the mysterious guest. "Sarah, I can't give you specifics over the phone, but someone very significant has requested to observe the hearing today. Security will be much tighter than usual, and there may be some delays in the proceedings." Sarah arrived at the Institute at 8:30 to find the parking lot filled with news vans and reporters. Camera crews had set up outside the main entrance, and journalists were already conducting interviews with anyone willing to speak about the controversy. She noticed Dr. Marcus Webb stepping out of a black sedan, adjusting his tie as photographers captured his arrival. Inside the building, the main conference room had been transformed into a formal hearing chamber. Rows of chairs faced a long table, where the board of directors would sit in judgment. At the center of the room was a smaller table where Sarah would present her defense. The atmosphere felt more like a courtroom than an academic setting. Board members began filing into the room at 9 o'clock, their faces serious and professional. Dr. Harrison took his seat at the center of the table, flanked by 8 other directors representing different departments and outside institutions. Sarah recognized most of them, having worked with several over the years. The hearing began with Dr. Harrison reading a statement outlining the purpose of the proceedings. "We are here today to address allegations that have been made regarding the legitimacy of awards given to Dr. Sarah Chen. This hearing will provide an opportunity for all parties to present evidence and testimony regarding these matters." Marcus Webb was called to present his case first. He stood confidently at the podium, his Harvard credentials giving weight to his words. "Distinguished members of the board," he began, "I am here today not to attack Dr. Chen personally, but to raise important questions about the integrity of our award process." Webb spent nearly an hour outlining his concerns. He presented a timeline showing how quickly Sarah had received multiple prestigious awards, suggesting that the pace was unrealistic for genuine scientific achievement. He questioned whether proper peer review had been conducted on her classified research, arguing that secrecy made independent verification impossible. "How can we trust awards based on work that cannot be independently verified?" Webb asked the board. Dr. Chen's age and background, while admirable in many ways, raised questions about whether she could have realistically made such significant discoveries so quickly. During Webb's presentation, Sarah noticed several board members taking notes and nodding thoughtfully. Dr. Margaret Foster, the representative from the National Academy of Sciences, seemed particularly influenced by Webb's arguments about peer review processes. When Webb finished, Dr. Harrison invited other critics to speak. Dr. Patricia Morgan, participating via video conference, reiterated her concerns about the verification process. "While I don't question Dr. Chen's intelligence or dedication," she said, "I believe we must examine whether our excitement about promoting young scientists may have led us to lower our standards." 3 more scientists spoke in support of Webb's position, each raising similar questions about the speed and scope of Sarah's recognition. The cumulative effect of their testimony created a picture of a scientific community that had perhaps been too eager to celebrate diversity at the expense of rigorous evaluation. Finally, it was Sarah's turn to defend herself. She approached the podium carrying a thick folder of documentation, her heart pounding but her mind clear. She had spent years preparing for scientific presentations, but none had felt as crucial as this moment. "Members of the board," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I stand before you today, not just to defend my awards, but to defend the integrity of the scientific process itself. The work that led to these honors represents 15 years of dedicated research, conducted under the highest standards of scientific rigor. Sarah opened her presentation by walking the board through her educational background, providing documentation of every degree, every course, every professor who had mentored her. She showed her undergraduate transcripts, revealing a perfect academic record, and early research projects that had already demonstrated her exceptional abilities. My PhD thesis was reviewed by 5 external examiners, including 2 Nobel laureates, Sarah continued. The examination process took 8 months and included 3 independent replications of my key experiments. This work formed the foundation for everything that followed. She then detailed her 15 years at the Institute, presenting a chronological account of her research projects. Each project built upon the previous work, creating a logical progression that led to her major breakthroughs. Sarah showed how her early experiments in quantum mechanics had gradually evolved into more complex investigations of quantum computing and cryptography. For each of her awarded discoveries, Sarah provided extensive documentation. She presented laboratory notebooks with dated entries, showing the development of her ideas over time. She showed peer review comments from scientific journals, demonstrating that her work had been rigorously evaluated by experts in the field before publication. The Presidential Medal of Science Committee spent 18 months reviewing my quantum algorithm work, Sarah explained. The review process included independent testing at 3 national laboratories and consultation with 12 experts in quantum computing. The algorithm has since been implemented in systems that are currently protecting critical infrastructure. She addressed Webb's concerns about her age by presenting examples of other scientists who had made significant discoveries early in their careers. Albert Einstein developed his theory of special relativity at 26. Marie Curie isolated radium at 34. Scientific breakthrough is not limited by age but by imagination, preparation, and persistence. The board listened intently as Sarah explained the classified nature of much of her work. I understand the challenge this presents for independent verification, she said. However, I can provide documentation showing that my classified projects were reviewed by multi-agency committees, including scientists from the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Energy. Dr. James Kim was called to testify about his collaboration with Sarah. He had worked closely with her for 8 years and could speak to her research methods and discoveries firsthand. Dr. Chen is the most meticulous scientist I have ever known, he told the board. Every experiment is documented in extraordinary detail. Every result is verified multiple times before publication. Kim presented examples of Sarah's research notebooks, showing the careful progression from initial hypothesis through experimentation to final conclusions. These are not the records of someone who borrowed ideas from others, he said. These are the detailed thoughts of a brilliant mind working through complex problems. Maria Rodriguez, Sarah's former graduate student, testified about Sarah's mentoring and teaching. Dr. Chen never asked us to simply accept her ideas, Rodriguez explained. She taught us to question everything, to verify results independently, to think critically about our assumptions. She modeled the highest standards of scientific integrity. Several other colleagues spoke in Sarah's defense, but the most compelling testimony came from Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a quantum physicist from Oxford University. Warren had independently replicated several of Sarah's experiments and could verify their accuracy. I have spent 2 years attempting to verify Dr. Chen's work, Warren testified via video conference. Not only are her results accurate, but her methodologies are more sophisticated than anything I have seen in this field. Her discoveries represent genuine advances in our understanding of quantum mechanics. As the testimony continued, Sarah noticed increased activity around the building. Through the conference room windows, she could see additional security personnel taking positions outside. Black SUVs had arrived in the parking lot, and men in dark suits were speaking into earpieces. Dr. Harrison also noticed the commotion and called for a brief recess. During the break, Sarah overheard board members discussing the unusual security presence. Dr. Foster mentioned seeing Secret Service agents in the hallway, while Dr. Robert Martinez commented that he had never seen such elaborate security for an academic hearing. When the hearing resumed, Dr. Harrison announced that there would be one additional witness. We have been requested to pause our proceedings briefly to accommodate a special observer who has expressed interest in today's testimony. The board members looked confused, clearly not having been informed about this development. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she wondered who could have such authority to interrupt a formal institute hearing. At that moment, a security agent entered the room and spoke quietly to Dr. Harrison. The director's eyes widened as he listened to the message. He nodded and turned back to the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Harrison announced, his voice carrying a note of amazement, "we have been informed that we will have a very distinguished visitor joining us shortly. I ask that everyone remain seated and maintain appropriate decorum." The room fell silent as the implications of Harrison's words sank in. Sarah felt her mouth go dry as she realized that someone with extraordinary authority was about to arrive. The controversy surrounding her work had apparently reached the highest levels of government. Webb looked visibly nervous for the first time that day, adjusting his papers and glancing toward the door. The board members straightened in their chairs, clearly understanding that this was no ordinary academic proceeding. Outside the conference room, Sarah could hear voices and footsteps in the hallway. The sound of multiple people moving with purpose grew louder as they approached the door. Whatever was about to happen would either vindicate her completely or destroy her career forever. Dr. Harrison stood up from his chair, prompting everyone else in the room to rise as well. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she waited to see who would walk through that door and what they might reveal about her work. The door handle turned slowly, and Sarah held her breath as the most powerful person in the country was about to enter the room, carrying with them the truth that would change everything. The door opened and President Michael Rodriguez stepped into the conference room, flanked by 2 Secret Service agents and followed by a small entourage of advisors. The President of the United States had come personally to attend Sarah's hearing, and the shock on everyone's faces was immediate and profound. Dr. Harrison stammered a greeting, clearly overwhelmed by the unexpected visit. "Mr. President, this is an extraordinary honor. We had no idea you would be attending personally." President Rodriguez smiled warmly and gestured for everyone to remain seated as he took a chair that had been quickly arranged for him at the front of the room. "Dr. Harrison, members of the board, I apologize for the interruption, but I felt it was important to be here today. What's being discussed in this room has implications far beyond academic recognition." Sarah felt her legs weaken as she realized the President of the United States had come specifically because of her case. She couldn't imagine why her research would warrant such high-level attention, but the serious expressions on the faces of the President's advisors suggested this was about much more than scientific awards. Marcus Webb looked completely stunned, his confident demeanor evaporating as he realized he might have made a terrible mistake. The other critics in the room shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly unsure about their positions. President Rodriguez addressed the room directly. "I'm here today because Dr. Sarah Chen's work has been absolutely critical to our national security and the safety of the American people. The allegations that have been made against her are not only false, but they threaten to undermine one of the most important scientific programs in our nation's history." The president turned to look directly at Sarah, his expression conveying both respect and appreciation. "Dr. Chen, for reasons of national security, much of your work has remained classified. Today, I'm here to declassify certain information so that these proceedings can be conducted with full knowledge of your contributions to our country." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to understand what the president was about to reveal. She knew her work was important, but she had no idea it had reached the level of presidential attention. President Rodriguez nodded to one of his advisors, who handed him a folder marked with classified stamps. 3 years ago, our intelligence agencies intercepted communications, indicating that a foreign government had developed quantum computers capable of breaking our most sophisticated encryption systems. Our entire military communications network, our financial infrastructure, and our critical defense systems were at risk. The room was absolutely silent as the president continued. Dr. Chen's quantum cryptography work was the foundation for our response to this threat. Her algorithms didn't just advance scientific knowledge. They literally saved our national security infrastructure from complete compromise. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she began to understand the full scope of how her work had been used. She had known it was classified, but she hadn't realized the immediate danger it had addressed. The Presidential Medal of Science wasn't given to Dr. Chen for academic achievement alone, the president explained. It was awarded because her work prevented what could have been the most devastating cyber attack in American history. Her quantum encryption methods are currently protecting communications for our military, our intelligence agencies, and our critical infrastructure. Dr. Margaret Foster, who had earlier questioned Sarah's qualifications, looked visibly shaken by these revelations. The board members were exchanging glances, clearly realizing they had been judging the case without crucial information. President Rodriguez continued his testimony. The International Physics Prize recognized Dr. Chen's discovery of a new quantum state, but what wasn't publicly disclosed is that this discovery led to breakthrough developments in quantum radar systems. These systems are now deployed to protect our airspace and have successfully detected stealth aircraft from nations that considered themselves undetectable. Marcus Webb's face had turned pale as he realized the magnitude of his error. He had accused one of the nation's most valuable scientists of fraud based on incomplete information. The Defense Innovation Award, the president went on, was given for work that I can now partially declassify. Dr. Chen developed quantum communication systems that are completely immune to interception. These systems are currently being used to coordinate our most sensitive military operations around the world. The president stood up and walked toward Sarah's table. Dr. Chen, would you please stand? Sarah rose on shaking legs, unsure of what was about to happen. The president extended his hand to her, and she shook it as cameras flashed from the press area. On behalf of the American people, President Rodriguez said, I want to personally thank you for your service to our nation. Your work has saved lives, protected our democracy, and maintained our technological superiority in an increasingly dangerous world. The president then turned to address Marcus Webb directly. Dr. Webb, I understand your concerns about academic integrity, but your allegations have put one of our nation's most valuable assets at risk. Dr. Chen's work is so sensitive that we've had to maintain extraordinary secrecy around it, which unfortunately made it vulnerable to the kind of speculation you've engaged in. Webb stood up, his face flushed with embarrassment. Mr. President, I had no idea. If I had known the classified nature of Dr. Chen's work, I never would have questioned its legitimacy. I owe Dr. Chen a sincere apology. President Rodriguez nodded. The apology is appreciated, Dr. Webb. But the damage to Dr. Chen's reputation has been significant. I hope this information helps restore the respect she deserves from the scientific community. The president's advisor stepped forward with another document. With the president's authorization, we're also declassifying information about Dr. Chen's current projects. She is leading a team developing quantum computers that will revolutionize everything from medical research to space exploration. The potential applications are so significant that several world leaders have personally requested briefings on her work. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scope of what she was hearing. She had always known her work was important, but learning that it had prevented national security disasters and attracted international attention was almost too much to process. Dr. Harrison found his voice and addressed the president. Sir, this information certainly changes the context of our proceedings. We clearly didn't have access to crucial facts about Dr. Chen's contributions. President Rodriguez nodded. That's exactly why I'm here. Dr. Harrison. We can't allow misinformation to destroy the career of someone who has served our country with such distinction. Dr. Chen's awards weren't just deserved, they were understatements of her actual contributions. The president turned back to address the entire room. I want everyone here to understand something important. Dr. Chen represents the best of American science and innovation. She came from humble beginnings, worked harder than anyone around her, and achieved breakthroughs that have protected millions of American lives. Questioning her achievements isn't just wrong, it's dangerous to our national interests. Dr. Patricia Morgan, who had supported Webb's allegations, requested permission to speak via video conference. Mr. President, Dr. Chen, I deeply regret my participation in questioning your work. Without access to classified information, I made judgments based on incomplete data. Your achievements are clearly extraordinary, and I apologize for any doubt I may have cast on your reputation." One by one, the other scientists who had supported Webb's position offered similar apologies. The board members looked embarrassed that they had even considered the allegations worth investigating. President Rodriguez addressed Sarah once more. "Dr. Chen, I know this controversy has been difficult for you personally, but I want you to know that your work continues to be absolutely vital to our nation's security. We're counting on you to continue pushing the boundaries of what's possible in quantum science." Sarah finally found her voice. "Mr. President, thank you for coming here today. I've always known my work was important, but learning about its real-world applications makes all the long nights and difficult experiments worthwhile. I'm honored to serve our country through my research." The president smiled. "The honor is ours, Dr. Chen. America is stronger because of scientists like you, who dedicate their lives to advancing human knowledge while protecting our nation." As the president prepared to leave, he made one final statement to the room. "Let this serve as a reminder to everyone present that we must be careful about making judgments without complete information." Dr. Chen's case shows how dangerous it can be to question achievements based on appearances rather than facts. After the president departed, the hearing room erupted in conversations. Board members surrounded Sarah to offer their apologies and congratulations. Dr. Harrison announced that the board would issue a formal statement supporting Sarah and condemning the unfounded allegations against her. Marcus Webb approached Sarah personally, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Dr. Chen, I cannot adequately express how sorry I am. My concerns about academic integrity led me to make terrible accusations against someone who is clearly one of our nation's most valuable scientists. I will be issuing a public retraction and apology." Sarah looked at Webb with a mixture of hurt and understanding. "Dr. Webb, I appreciate your apology. I hope this experience teaches us all the importance of seeking complete information before making serious accusations." In the days following the hearing, the scientific community rallied around Sarah. Major journals published editorials praising her work and condemning the rush to judgment that had nearly damaged her career. Universities invited her to speak about her research, and young scientists began reaching out for mentorship opportunities. The media coverage completely changed direction. Instead of questioning her achievements, news outlets began investigating how such a valuable scientist could have been subjected to baseless accusations. Several publications wrote in-depth profiles of Sarah's journey from the daughter of immigrants to one of the nation's most important researchers. Sarah returned to her laboratory with renewed purpose and support from colleagues around the world. The quantum computer in the corner continued its quiet calculations, processing the algorithms that were protecting the nation's secrets. But now, Sarah knew that her work was making a difference in ways she had never imagined. Her parents called her after seeing the news coverage of the president's visit. Her father, speaking in his broken English mixed with tears of pride, told her that he had always known she was special. Her mother could barely speak through her emotions, simply repeating how proud she was of her daughter's achievements. Dr. Kim returned to working closely with Sarah, and their research projects received increased funding and support. Maria Rodriguez, inspired by her mentor's vindication, decided to pursue her own PhD in quantum physics under Sarah's guidance. The Institute's board formally censured the investigation and established new protocols to prevent similar situations in the future. They created a special advisory committee to help board members understand the implications of classified research before making decisions about allegations. 6 months after the hearing, Sarah received notification that she had been selected to receive the National Medal of Technology and Innovation, the nation's highest honor for technological achievement. This time, there were no questions about her qualifications or the legitimacy of the award. As Sarah reflected on the experience, she realized that the controversy, while painful, had ultimately strengthened her resolve and demonstrated the importance of her work. She had learned that truth, while sometimes slow to emerge, eventually prevails over speculation and prejudice. The quantum computers in her laboratory continued their work, protecting the nation and advancing human knowledge. And Sarah continued her research, knowing that somewhere in the highest levels of government, officials were counting on her brilliance to keep America safe and strong. The girl from Chinatown who had spent her childhood reading physics textbooks had become one of the most important scientists in the world. And now, finally, everyone knew it.